how exactly increased physical activity, not being sedentary among kids, helps with their cognitive function.
Brain is physically challenged in the same way that your muscles elsewhere in the body might be challenged by exercise.
Here in India, traditionally, we are taught that your first and only important thing is for you to prioritize your education.
Finland, for example, they start school later. They don't have such a long school day. They're allowing children to play more.
Even 100 steps are not taken by the kids, literally to go to school and come back.
There are barriers, of course. Barriers is part of understanding how we get people into physical activity as well. And I think active commuting is what we call it. Active to work, active to school is a fantastic way as part of your physical activity package.
How do we get them to start being non-sedentary?
We have to choose things that initially we find interesting or maybe reasonably attractive. That's the core of it.
Professor Stuart, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Your several decades of teaching and researching is of great value, and I'm sure it will significantly help our viewers and listeners. And so accepting to speaking with us is a great pleasure to us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Vikas. So nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Not at all. And as we were discussing backstage, being fit is a great place to be. But the compliance to being fit, or the discipline to being fit, is something that makes all the difference. And we will talk about all of that from an expert like you. But before we get to that, how about we set some context to who you are and what you've been doing. I know if we were to talk about it, we could take a day to just speak about that, but it will rather help to just maybe briefly talk about your academic and professional background.
Yes, well, currently I'm a research professor in Australia, although I hail from the UK. I spent a lot of my career in the UK, and I started from being a physical education teacher through to an academic in sport and exercise science, with an emphasis on psychology and behaviour change, and then very much into health and wider aspects of health behaviours. So you could argue, towards the end of my career. I work part-time now as a research professor. And I suppose one legacy that I would like to be proud of, I am proud of, is a book that I've written on the psychology of physical activity, where we try to summarize a number of key points about behavior change and people's psychology and mental health, all around exercise and physical activity that people try to do for their health, rather than, for example, high-level sport performance, important though that is, and interesting though that is. We tend to write more about everyday physical activity. So that's my background in brief.
Nice. And I think it's the 4th edition, which has now been out for about 3-4 years, in 2021. Yes. 4th edition, right?
Yes, that's correct. So we're gearing up to see whether we can manage another edition.
It will be great, but I think here in India we do have a Kindle edition available, and I guess the hardbound copy is not available as yet. But we will provide the details of it in the show notes. But since we talked about the book, would you take a couple of minutes to just walk us through what are the primary topics that you cover? Because I feel the subject itself, if I look at it, it's that itself suggests it's so important for people. That is psychology of physical activity, determinants, well-being, and interventions.
Well, those 3 aspects of the subtitle that we've used over many years is pretty much the key. So, as you say, determinants, well-being, and intervention. So determinants are the factors that might be affecting whether people participate or not. The term determinant sounds a little bit strong, but there could be factors associated with participation. Sometimes we call them correlates of participation. But yeah, determinants is all about what factors might determine whether people become more active, stay active, and so on. Well-being is really around mental well-being, mental health, and of course that's a key aspect of psychology and a big topic these days in lots of domains of our lives. So we talk about the relationship between physical activity and mental health. And then finally, interventions. Can we change these behaviors? So if it's through well-being, through mental health, it's good for us. In physical terms, it's good for us. And we understand the determinants. Can we actually change people's behavior to get them started, to get them to maintain, and so on? So it's a three-pronged attack on determinants and interventions with a big section on mental health.
Great. And I think that today's conversation could revolve around these three topics as well, because is the gist of just everything so long as health and fitness is concerned, in my opinion. I just, as I told you, I'm traveling, and over the weekend we were meeting about 60 plus health and fitness founders, and we were out. The meet also included 2.5 hours of workout, and as we were discussing with each other, as people started to get comfortable talking to each other, one of the things that came out very importantly, that was the well-being of actually the health and fitness founders themselves. From the top, people would think that, hey, they are health and fitness founders, they are the ones who are getting India to be fitter. But here we saw almost everyone was focusing on the emphasis of being fitter through their mind as well. And we were sharing where were our lows and how we managed, how exercise helped us. And so I think it's, and by the way, with the caveat that none of us, most of us are um, not top class athletes. We are daily fitness enthusiasts. And that's why this topic is even more important. And so what you cover, I guess, is the central axis of being fitter, if not the only thing.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point, actually, because, we are often try to be persuaded to be more active by, let's say, health professionals, nurses, doctors, maybe even, teachers, work colleagues. And it's an interesting argument. Do they have to be active and fit themselves to be more persuasive to people? And to a certain extent, you would suspect that is logical. If you go and see your doctor, your GP, and they don't look particularly fit and well, or they have poor health habits themselves, maybe the message doesn't get through as well. So I think it's a good argument to have those promoting a number of health behaviors to engage in them themselves. They won't be perfect. None of us are perfect, but at least they might be quite good role models. I think that's quite important. Yeah.
True. At least we can strive to get there. And here um, the activities, or rather the fitness wellness, was not only limited to looking fit. Most of the fitness and health founders, we look fit, at least moderately. But the mental wellness aspect was so important, because the moment you get into business, there are several other factors that may not be as happy or as easy, and because you are running a business at the end of it, which inherently is going to be stressful. So talking about that was quite important. Let's take from the right from the start, that is the determinants of physical activity. Getting started, what are these? I've seen at least one, at least from my experiences, that is, when people reach out to us, they have been um, awakened through a sudden instance of having an issue, an onset of an issue, or just one sudden day there is a realization they need to be fitter, they need not to be obese, etc. But mostly it's driven by some shocking instance or activity, and that's how they get started, and that's how people reach out to us most of the times. But I think this may be a very crude way of putting. I would like a more academic and sophisticated way of putting. So what would you think are the key determinants?
Well, first of all, although we've written a book on psychology of physical activity and determinants, being a major section, I'll be the first to say it's not just about psychology. There are lots of influences on our lives, including physical activity. For example, our social situation, people we either interact with on a regular basis at work, in our communities, or at home, they can be influential on what we choose to do or don't do. They can be very supportive. They could be, unfortunately, maybe not very supportive sometimes. So the social context is important. Your physical environment is important. Can I go out of my house and have a pleasant environment in which to walk or to run? Do I have local facilities if I want to use those? So all of that it's not actually independent of psychology because they interact, but essentially they are slightly different from what's going on in your head. And then, of course, the psychological elements, of course, they're important. What you believe, what you think, what you feel, how motivated you are, what you feel during physical activity and after physical activity. Does it reinforce doing something later, or is it an unpleasant experience and therefore you choose something else? That's also possible, of course. So these things kind of interact. So it's multi-dimensional, multifaceted. One thing I'll say is that there are lots of different settings in which physical activity could take place. And these influences, social, environmental, psychological, might have different effects in different environments. But they're all pretty much relevant across a number of different settings: promoting activity in schools, promoting activity in the workplace, promoting it in the community, promoting it in your home. If you think of all these people now working from home, and some people might be retired, spending a lot of time in the house, how do they get their physical activity if it's not outside? So a number of settings, I think, is also important, and we should focus on those as well, or learn more about those.
Right. And I think it's a very important point. It could also be that prioritizing fitness, being aware that they need to prioritize fitness, that is important as well. Where I'm coming from here in India, traditionally, we are taught as child when we were kids that your first and only important thing is for you to prioritize your education, because that will socially and economically uplift the the condition of the village, of the house, and of yours. And as a result, what happens is, physical activity not necessarily gets the top priority. How do we teach the the priority right from the start, particularly to parents?
Yeah. Again, you make an excellent point, Vikas. And I've done a bit of work with people in Singapore, for example, and Singapore have a similar culture, very strong drive for education amongst their children, and so on. And of course, you could argue that's a great thing, and we're not gonna want bad educational outcomes. We want good educational outcomes. But I think we can rethink or rephrase how physical activity fits into that. I don't think it should be a matter of either or. It's not either a good education or you can be physically active, play sports, and so on. There are many, many examples where people do both very successfully. Now, one argument I would make is around the mental health side of being physically active. So not only might you have better mental health more generally, less depression, less stress, better feelings about yourself, what we call self-esteem, but also there's, when I say emerging, it's more than emerging, good evidence around cognitive or brain health and exercise and physical activity. So what do I mean by that? Well, by being physically active, in whatever way, you should get some benefits for brain health, the health of the brain, and your alertness, your concentration, your memory, your processing. There's plenty of evidence that that happens. They've made the case that your academic performance increases as a result of being physically fit and active. Now, that's a much more difficult area to study, actually. So it's what you might call a messy area, because lots of things can influence your
Influence.
academic performance.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there is evidence that is possible. Now, if we can make that argument to parents and education providers in India and Singapore and other countries, maybe they could see the benefits of physical activity for education, not that it's a competition against education.
Right.
So I think the cognitive side is a good argument to make there.
Right. No, it's a great point that the the so-called traditional mindset has been that you only have limited time, and so either you focus on being better academically or you focus on playing and you'll be tired, then you can't focus on your studies. But it seems from where you are coming from that it rather helps, and we all have been now privy to these information that actually being active helps in so many ways, and that eventually helps to get people to be better at almost everything.
Yeah, and I
um,
also think some educational systems
yeah.
that appear not to be cramming lots of study hours into all hours of the day, as it were, for young children. Places like Finland, for example, they start
Yeah.
school later. They don't have such a long school day. They're allowing children to play more. They have pretty good, in fact, exceptionally good educational outcomes. So it's not just about how many hours you're studying. It's about quality, and it's about other things that are going alongside it, including physical activity.
Nice. Would you mind just explaining this to people so that it benefits them in understanding how exactly increased physical activity, not being sedentary among kids as they are growing up, particularly, helps with their cognitive functions, helps
Mm.
with their their decision making and focus, etc., so that there is a little deeper appreciation of where we are coming from.
Yeah, we often test these things. So, for example, you could run an experiment where you have some people doing physical activity and others not, and then you test them on a number of cognitive tasks. It could be decision making, could be memory, or it could be scanning the brain and seeing what's activated during exercise. And when all of those different tests that go on show that a number of key parts of the brain are activated during exercise, some of which will enhance what we call executive functioning. Executive functioning is a kind of, bringing together some of the key aspects of the brain that allows you to memorize and process information and so on. And, I'm not a neuroscientist, so
Yeah.
the micro level understanding of this is a little beyond me, but I know that these mechanisms do exist, and that the
Right.
brain is physically challenged in the same way that your muscles elsewhere in the body might be challenged by exercise. These actually exercise that involves a little bit of cognitive functioning itself, like decision making, like some sports where you have to think as well as move, they could be even better for you, actually. But nevertheless, exercise itself does seem to stimulate the brain in a certain way that allows for these positive cognitive functions to occur.
Got it. And just to extend this a little further, um, in case people are listening and they get interested, this makes sense for their kids, and so they want to prioritize physical activity for them. Um, is there a basic framework as to how much time they should be spending
Hmm.
so that they understand it's not 20 hours a week? that they need to send their kids to be just physically active. It could be a lot lesser if there is a regular exercise that is being undertaken. So I would request your help in understanding this for people.
Yeah. So most of these time guidelines are around. Okay, let me start again. There are national and international guidelines for physical activity and health. So how much is enough is the basic question. But all this is based around nearly always basically physical health outcomes, like body fatness and cardiovascular fitness, and for adults more like diseases, type 2 diabetes, early death, those kind of things. So how much physical activity will give you a healthy life and will reduce these diseases or enhance your existing health. Now, for young people, which is essentially school age, up to school age, end of school age children and adolescents, we give a rough kind of rule of thumb of an hour of physical activity on most days of the week. Okay. Now you can argue what's most and so on. But, if young people are doing about an hour every day, they're doing quite well. Now, is that a lot? Is it too much? Is it not? Who knows what parents might think of that. But when you think of an hour alongside everything else that they do, it's actually not that much, particularly if it's integrated into social games and other types of exercise, which they find intrinsically appealing, and it's maybe even good for them socially, then why not? But it's approximately an hour. I could give you more details, but it's not worth it in the time here. They will have optimal health benefits. Now, if they do less, is that a waste of time? No. If they do less, it's still likely to be beneficial, but optimally, you want them to be doing about an hour most days of the week, five, 6 days a week.
Got it. Got it. And I think that makes a lot of sense, where the duration of 1 hour could just seem a lot, but like what you said, if someone enjoys that activity and it's integrated in a way that it doesn't look like a compulsion to go and attend, but rather is it's part of my daily life, which I just want to enjoy. Like, for example, I've seen the younger adults and kids, they doing things in a team, doing
Yeah.
it playfully, and not being judged on a single parameter of being perfect, that is being the fastest, or their success metric is not around performance as much, but success metric is about participation. Then the kids are also less overwhelmed, and there is high chance that they're enjoying it for a much longer period of time, and I guess that's exactly what is to be done anyway.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. I agree 100% with you. And if you integrate that kind of activity alongside maybe traveling to school actively, doing some leisure activity after school or in a break or something, you are immediately accumulating these bits of physical activity. So that 1 hour, if it initially thinks, oh, that's a long time, well, you've probably done half of it before you realize, by doing all these activities, which have become in modern society, they've substituted in inactivity, cars, transport, and all the rest of it. So I think we can make this work, but you have to think of it a little differently, that we integrate physical activity as much as we can in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, when we were kids, we grew up in a village, and so our school was about 5 kilometers, and we would walk to the school. And most of the times, we are walking, running to the school, and coming back. And honestly, there was no separate need to doing anything, and it used to be a lot of fun. While it was looked at being associated with poverty today, but I feel it was possibly one of the most rich experiences. Today, when I see kids, the parents come almost stressed out early morning, waiting for the buses, for them to be in this constant fear they should not miss the bus. Almost even 100 steps are not taken by the kids, literally, to go to school and come back.
Yeah, and okay, I realise that not everybody can walk or cycle even or run to school. The distances might not be appropriate, and in the current society, depending where you are in the world, the environment may not be great. Okay, I
Yeah,
understand that not everybody can do it, but a lot more can do it than currently do it. And,
yeah,
but there are barriers, of course. Barriers is part of understanding how we get people into physical activity as well. But if we can minimize those barriers, and that's going to require effort from local government people, environment planners, teachers, schools, parents, if we can minimize those barriers, we're at least going to make some progress. And I think active commuting is what we call it,
yeah.
active to work, active to school, is a fantastic way as part of your physical activity package.
Totally, totally. And I totally agree that on one hand we can keep blaming the government, we can keep blaming the infrastructure, etc. But also we are living in the same environment anyway. So why not to live happily by being part of it, and include active commuting. We in fact, where we live and where we work, our place is about 4 kilometers to work, and most of the times we have to take a car because it just doesn't allow for you to walk, but it's so warm. But
Yeah.
on the days that it's cooler, and also on weekends, a lot of times we go to work on weekends as well, we just walk. My wife and I, we both go to the same place, and we just listen, nice walk, go to work and come back, and it's rather a lot more fun. There is so much you can also explore while walking, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I like to do it myself. And, we're talking earlier about technology and whether that detracts from people being active. Well, you could mix the two. You can listen to wonderful podcasts,
Yeah,
or you could listen to music, or while you're walking. Or you could be social. You could walk with somebody. You could enjoy the local environment. So lots of positives, whilst we also recognize, yes, there are some barriers, but we're trying to break those down.
yeah, yeah. Now, coming to adult athletes, I call them, because I feel
Mhm.
everyone is an athlete in some way. Um, how do we get them to start being non-sedentary? How can we get them to start being uh, prioritizing their fitness and get them to get started and stay compliant? I know a lot in one question, but this will be helpful.
Well, okay, let's talk about compliance. It's a really good
Yes.
question. And, first of all, people have to realistically, they have to be getting involved in physical activities that they are attracted to, or at least not completely turned off. You might like swimming, I don't. I might like walking, you don't. So we all have our own preferences. And I think we should build on that.
Yeah,
And of course, what's most convenient, because that's going to be very important. But the key thing for me is if people are doing a bit of physical activity but not sustaining it, it suggests that one of the barriers is they're not being reinforced very much in what they're doing. If you look at behaviors that we're trying to reduce or even eliminate, like smoking or heavy drinking, or even much more severe things like drug use, then they're nearly all driven by strong reinforcement
yeah,
feelings. Drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, we can condemn them, but they're highly attractive to a lot of people. Now, how can we make physical activity attractive? And so we have to choose things that initially we find interesting or maybe reasonably attractive. We have to set them, um, not necessarily set them goals, but suggest things that they could do which are not too difficult to start with, that they don't finish the session completely exhausted and things like that. And we focus on the mental health, actually. We focus on the feel good factor,
yeah,
almost regardless of the physical element to start with. And so the key is we want them to be coming back because they have some element of enjoyment and satisfaction in it. It sounds very simple, but that's the core of it. And I don't think we've emphasized that enough over the years. I think that's an important point to note.
Yeah, yeah. And just staying with this question to being compliant, sounds right that this is what we should be doing. But I've seen it works pretty well in the start, and then it falls off very quickly, where
Yeah.
we're not able to continue. And I think one of the things you say, that if you take up something that's interesting, that is to your liking, that will possibly higher chances that you will continue with it. But
Yeah.
what are some of other ways I can stay compliant, and at what stage do I start to see some success of being compliant, that it is making sense? Because um, we do see on number of occasions beginners take a resolution, they commit to being fit or etc., but every year we see the numbers and they don't look to appreciative that obesity continues to rise, the
Mm.
diabetes issues continue to rise, and sedentary lifestyle is prevailing almost everywhere.
Well, we've argued over the years that trying to get immediate results physically is extremely difficult. Well, it could almost be impossible. You can't suddenly solve obesity with 2 exercise sessions. So that could be demoralizing if people are expecting quick and easy results.
Yeah,
However, if we focus again on the mental health side, the feel good side, it doesn't have to, we're not going to cure depression in a session, but at least they feel better. They maybe feel good that they've done something positive. They feel a bit more relaxed. If they have a shower afterwards, they now feel much better. That is more reinforcing and it's more immediate. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is at a more practical level, if you schedule these types of physical activities into your daily life, and when I say schedule, it doesn't have to be physically into a diary, but that helps. I often do that. I'll say, when I'm going to do this, when I'm going to do that. And you really try to stick to that. Because if you think, well, I'll do it when I can, you may not get round to it. So some
yeah,
kind of scheduling is important. And then the third aspect is recruiting people around you to be supportive and maybe even to join you. We'll both walk together to work today. We'll both walk to the shop. We'll both go to the gym. So that's really important as well. So when you add all these things together, the feel good, the scheduling, the social, you're building a much better chance of sticking with it, even though I appreciate, it's sometimes quite difficult to sustain. And that's why we don't have a great track record in this area. But all these things can help and they build. That's all I would
yeah,
say on that.
yeah. And one of the things I have seen that works for me is something that you also covered, that is recruiting people around you and creating an environment that's conducive for you. In fact, even if I'm traveling, I would like to stay somewhere where nearby I can go to a park to
Yeah.
run, instead of staying right in the city center where there could not be place to even walk outside, for example. And that helps. Taking Instead of taking an early morning flight, if there is a liberty of going the previous evening and then be able to run in the morning. I've seen these
Yeah.
are very small things, but I've seen these things work for me.
Yeah. There have been a number of researchers over the years that have focused on integrating these kind of things into your schedule, into your life, and one actually, recommended if you're traveling, for example, in business, you have certain shoes that you can feel comfortable walking in, and so you're
Yeah,
looking to walk rather than go on moving walkways and standing still, and you have a lightweight jacket rather than a heavy jacket which feels uncomfortable. And these are small. You think, wow, is that going to make much difference? Yes, it probably will, because you're more likely to move. And I've seen this in airports and train stations and so on, where people just stand still on escalators, and there's no encouragement to walk. So there are lots of little things that we could do for ourselves, and then around the environment we can promote. There are plenty of studies encouraging stair climbing instead of using an escalator, and they show very good results
Yeah.
with certain signs and colors and so on. So there are these strategies that we can use. It's just getting them more out there, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I resonate with this point particularly about selecting shoes. So several years ago, when I was in the US once, I remember I came across a particular shoe. Colehan is the brand name, and no sponsorship association or anything for that matter. Just personally, I'm saying I saw the sole of that was in a way that I could walk fast in it, and it's a leather at the top. The previous leather shoes that we were wearing as part of our office requirements, it just did not allow for you to walk a lot. So I moved to that, and I guess it's been now 10 years. I have always gone back to buy the same pair of shoes year on year, and at times you can just keep walking for kilometers and it feels equally good. I've seen some other people asking me, and they have started to wear similar shoes. So what you were saying, I totally relate with that myself particularly.
If you go back maybe a generation or maybe less, and you realize what women were expected to wear, maybe in the workplace or something, with high heels or something like that, completely unsuitable for any kind of walking and so on. It's going to discourage. So I think I'm glad to say we've moved in the right direction on that, and we should be doing more in that regard. Yeah.
True. And one other point of um, how people can start and be regular, be compliant with it, something that has worked for me anecdotally, and then some of the other researchers I've spoken with, they have also talked about it. That is knowing the why as to why you want to do it. As cliche as it sounds, but so important that is, in my opinion. That is, if you can actually figure out why you want to work out, literally that helps. For example, I could say I'm going to work out because I'm obese. That's one thing. But you want to work out because you want to be a better self in future. You want to see yourself differently than how you see yourself in the mirror. And if that commitment is good enough, I've seen that just stays with you.
Yeah, I think this is what I would call promoting the value or building people's values that support physical activity. Let me give
Yeah.
you an example. So, quite often, when we look at why people do not take up an exercise or physical activity in a structured way, they'll often say, I don't have time. That's the number one
Right.
barrier that people often state. But when you look at the time that they have, in reality, they do have time. I'm not saying that everybody has lots of spare time. People lead busy
Yeah.
lives, but they probably still, in 99% of cases, find some time
Yeah.
to do some physical activity. Okay, so why are they not doing it? Because they're valuing other behaviors instead of physical activity. And particularly if they see physical activity negatively, or they think it's going to be too hard work, they've got to
Yeah.
be super fit to do it, they push it down and down the value, a hierarchy of values. And this is what we need to work on, I think, is how to get physical activity higher up the value system so that it's important to people. Again, mental health will help with that. They will feel that and they want that. But that is something we need to talk to people about, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense to me. One other thing I wanted to seek your opinion on is from the output point of view. Some people pick up getting fitter because they want to be fit, and some people still maybe at the fence, or they don't know what's the result of if they are continuing to be active, because possibly they have never been there for that matter.
Mm.
If someone has never been active, getting them to be active could be a lot harder, because possibly they think that's how it is a way to live. So if they want to get fit, why should they get fit, what it means to the body, how do you feel, what is the output of you being regular with your workouts, etc. Would you be able to suggest that to people?
Well, one thing I would say is they might, I can't say this is true for everybody, they might be
Yeah.
somewhat overestimating or misunderstanding what physical activity is about there was a survey done many, many years ago in England that
Yeah.
suggested that one of the biggest barriers to women taking up physical activity was they didn't feel they were very good at sport.
Huh.
Now, sport's great, sport's important, sport's very valuable for a lot of people, but it's not the only form of physical activity. And so if we can help people better understand what physical activity means, active commuting we've spoken about, maybe even some stair climbing in the office, lots of walking options, none of which may be too demanding, and sport as well, but not to put them off sport. They may have had some bad experiences at school, for example. So I think first thing I would say to that is we need to try to help people understand what physical activity is. It's any movement,
Yeah.
anything, and they
Yeah.
may not even thought about that. Maybe they think
Yeah.
it's only the gym or competitive sport, and those are the only options. I don't like either of them, so I'm not doing it. So if we can, if we can modify their thoughts on that, that would be a big help.
Nice. No, I think these make sense. We started by talking about the importance of physical activity for younger adults and for kids. And then we graduated to talk about why it's important for adults and how people can stay compliant, how to prioritize this as well. I think, in my opinion, we covered a spectrum that will give people a framework to prioritize their fitness. I want to see from your experience of teaching as well as researching and also writing the book that's been quite popular. Do you think there is any other framework or anything else that's a key point for people to take away from here, from this conversation, that will help them take their next step to being fitter?
Well, I suppose one interesting bit of education, if you like, for
Yeah,
people is to help them understand that in previous generations, we were more active
right.
because of the way we lived our lives. It wasn't gyms, it wasn't necessarily certain sports. We were just more active in our work and in our um, movement around. We didn't use cars so much and so on. Now, we can't go back to those days. We may not want to go back to those days, but what we can do is learn
Yeah,
from that. And so one example we've already spoken about is, well, maybe we can use the car a bit less and we can do more active movement instead of a car. And I think that helps people understand that this is not such an unusual thing to be doing. Humans have done it forever.
yeah,
And some cultures, even now, are extremely active in very much a day-to-day basis without a sport or a gym in sight. And so, can we learn from that? Are there ways that we can be more physically active within our lifestyle? We don't have to use cars all the time, and we don't. There are lots of ways we can be physically active. Unfortunately, the way our current society is created, such as certain buildings, such as roads, such as infrastructure, I'm afraid it often discourages physical activity. But we have to be aware of that, and we have to work around it, and we look for solutions. And for example, if I travel by in an air through an airport, then I will nearly always avoid moving walkways. Now, I
okay.
can still walk on a moving walkway, of course, but
Yeah,
I could walk even better with a little bit more stimulus just on the ground. So little things like that. But you've got to be aware of that first.
yeah,
A lot of people aren't even aware. If you go onto an escalator and you see somebody standing still and you say to them, "Why are you standing still?" They probably haven't even thought about it.
yeah.
Okay, so we have to break into these things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think one of the things I've seen, just being aware and observing before taking an action is such a great way to doing something that's meaningful. For example, just because everybody's in a queue, you should first see what is the queue for, and do you need to be in the same queue or not. Much like how you're going in the elevator, is that the only way to commute? So
Yeah.
what you're saying is so important, and these are small meaningful ways for people to integrate in their lives and hopefully be fitter. With our commitment to also being fitter, we will sign
Uh,
off for today.
yeah. Well, if I can make one last point, and if that's okay. And so it's interesting you talk about fitness, and fitness is probably the most important kind of measure of how we're doing in physical activity. We do want to have high levels of fitness, no doubt about it. But you can't alter your fitness unless you do something, and that doing something is exercise and physical activity. So we often talk in psychology about, say, physical activity and exercise is the process, and fitness is the product, is the outcome. And so we should focus on the behavior, and the behavior is exercise, and all the things we talked about today. And hopefully physical fitness will be the positive result of that. I just wanted to make that point.
No, that's such an important point, that being part of the process and believing in that will definitely help to have the product that you wish to, because focusing on the product alone may not be sufficient. So no, thank you so much.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of
good.
sense. Thank you. Very good conversation, productive, and thank you very much again for joining and speaking with us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.